How's it going, everyone? Evan Petzold here from the Detroit Free Press, checking in on Saturday, May 21st from Cleveland, Ohio, where the Tigers are playing the Guardians. They just wrapped up their 39th game of the season, so right there on the cusp of 40 games. Record is 13-26. And look, for this team to get to 90 wins, which would ultimately put them in the playoffs, likely, they need to win 77 games the rest of the year. That's 77-46. That's winning just over 62% of their games the rest of the way. That's not a good recipe. That's not likely. They're the worst team in the American League. They're scoring 2.72 runs per game. That's worse in baseball. The offense has been miserable. There's been injuries all over the place. The starting rotation has a bunch of young arms and a Tarek Skubal who took a liner off the shin yesterday, and we'll see how he is moving forward. Bullpen's been solid, but can't be perfect. Javier Baez, the Tigers' 6-year, $140 million signing this offseason, he has not been what people have expected him to be. He has not met expectations. And AJ Hinch is managing this team where he's trying to stay positive, but the truth is they're just not winning ball games. They're losing. They're not scoring runs. They're dealing with injuries. It's been a mess of the season so far. It's been a mess of 39 games. And for a team that came into the year, they were expecting to make the postseason. They were talking about playing meaningful baseball down the stretch, talking about getting into October and getting into the hunt and trying to find a way. And now it feels like they'd be lucky if they'd even get to 500 by the end of the season. And that almost seems like it's out the door at this point too. But, getting to the playoffs, that was the goal this year for this team. And not to say the season's over, because a lot can still happen. And then there are a lot of games to be played. But if something doesn't change, right now, it seems like the Tigers are kind of going to be out on this one. It doesn't seem like there's really much of a chance that they can make a comeback, even with what they did last year. You go back to the slow start that they had, and finally in early May, they started to turn things around. It's May 21st. They still haven't turned things around. They're the worst team in the American League. And even what they did last year, the way that they played throughout the summer and into the early fall wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to make the playoffs. They weren't even close to being in contention. It wasn't even a question down the stretch. This time around, the Tigers still aren't playing good baseball. And, for them to make the playoffs, they're going to need to turn it on right now. And it just doesn't seem like that's going to happen with the way that this team has been playing. The offense is obviously the main concern. That's the biggest talking point when it comes to this team in 2022. They haven't gotten production from really anybody. Honestly, Miguel Cabrera has been the best player on this team so far, hitting 276 with 3 home runs in 34 games, and that's your best player. They haven't gotten production from Spencer Torkelson, the rookie who, number 1 overall pick in 2020. He's expected to produce. He hasn't done so. He's going to have to turn it on to avoid a demotion to AAA Toledo. But then you look down at the Toledo roster and you wonder, okay, like what's actually better for this team? Torkelson's a plus defender, and he keeps that infield intact with Scope at second base, Baez at shortstop, and Jamer Candelario at third. Speaking of those 3 guys, they're not hitting either. Jonathan Scope is hitting 157 over 38 games. He has not performed well. Jamer Candelario, while he has shown some good moments and some positive at-bats, he's hitting 201 in 37 games. Javier Baez has probably been the biggest disappointment for the Tigers this season, just considering that he was the guy that when the Tigers signed him, you had a guy for $140 million over 6 years. You expect him to be the guy that is going to hit even when nobody else is hitting. And so far, he hasn't done that. He's hitting just above 200, only has 2 home runs. He hasn't driven in a run since April. He hasn't hit a home run since April. And he looks like a complete mess at the plate too. 5 walks, 31 strikeouts. The chase rate is through the roof. The swing and miss rate is through the roof. Those are things that we kind of knew coming into the season, but he's grounding out a lot. He's not getting the ball in the air. Just not a recipe for success when it comes for Javier Baez, a guy who is essentially homer or bust, homer or strikeout. That's kind of the way that he operates. And when you're not hitting home runs and you're still striking out a lot and you're grounding out a lot, that's not good offensive production at all. Robbie Grossman hasn't hit a home run yet this season. He hit 22 last year. So it doesn't look like he's going to be able to get to another 2020 season. That was a big thing for him last year. He also has 1 stolen base. So a guy that hit 22 home runs and had 20 stolen bases last year is currently sitting at 0-1 in those categories through 35 games for him. Look, it's just been a really bad season for the Tigers so far. The offense has been the problem. The offense has been the issue. The starting rotation has actually been solid. despite some injuries. You've seen young pitchers like Bo Brisky and Alex Faedo. Joey Wentz came up and made his MLB debut. I'm not sure when we'll see him again. But there have been guys that have stepped up and produced within the rotation, despite a ton of injuries. The bullpen has been pretty solid all year, actually. And that's kind of been a point that's hurt the Tigers in the past when they've tried to compete and they've tried to contend. The bullpen has faltered. This year, the bullpen's been excellent. They cannot be asked to be perfect because they're not going to be perfect. Guys like Gregory Soto cannot be asked to be perfect because he's not going to be. And that's just the reality of it. But it seems like you're asking for perfection out of that crew every single time they go out there because the offense isn't scoring any runs. And if the starting pitchers can get you through 5 or 6 or 7 innings, the bullpen's going to have to be perfect the rest of the way. The Tigers are going to have to try to scratch across 1 or 2 runs. Essentially, they're not winning games because they're not getting that, 2-0 game. They're not winning 2-0. And you can't ask that from them every single time they go out and play. There needs to be more offense, and there just hasn't been so far. The injuries have also been a really big problem for this team. The Tigers have 4 starting pitchers on the injured list. Casey Mize, the right elbow sprain, Matt Manning with right shoulder inflammation, Michael Pineda with a right middle finger fracture, Tyler Alexander with a left elbow sprain, and don't forget about Spencer Turnbull, who's been down with Tommy John surgery. He's probably not going to come back this year, so the Tigers are going to be waiting on him. Eduardo Rodriguez, left side discomfort. He's expected to be moved to the 10-day injured list soon. Tigers signed him to a 5-year, $77 million deal. He's expected to be in this rotation and contribute. He's down with an injury. The positive news there, I guess, is that Matt Manning needs to make at least one more rehab start for AAA Toledo before he's going to be able to rejoin the rotation. He had a rehab outing recently that he had to leave early, left in the 3rd inning due to dehydration. So the Tigers were actually expecting to get him back pretty soon. They're going to have to wait another turn around the rotation for him. And talk about the starters being injured. I mean, that's all your opening day starters if you're the Tigers. And that's not even, that's kind of feels like it's just the tip of the iceberg when you think about Austin Meadows has vertigo. He didn't even make the trip here to Cleveland. He's been out. Outfielder Victor Reyes strained his right quad Sunday. And that same day he returned from a left quad strain. So he's not going to be back for a couple weeks. Reliever Will Vest, who's been really good and a really bright spot out of the bullpen and a great story this year, he tests positive for COVID-19. You've got guys that were high leverage relievers last year, Jose Cisnero and Kyle Funkhauser. They haven't pitched in the big leagues this season. And then Jake Rogers, the catcher, he's out with Tommy John surgery too. So injuries all across the board. Offense isn't hitting. You have a pitching staff that's trying to do everything they can to survive and stay alive. They're not getting any run support. That's what it comes back to. It comes back to the Tigers at 2.72 runs per game. It's not enough. That's worse than baseball, and it's not even close. You have your offensive production or lack thereof from Baez, Scope, Candelario, Torkelson, Grossman, guy like Miguel Cabrera. When you have a 39-year-old, and no doubt Miguel Cabrera is a great player, future Hall of Famer. He got to 3,000 hits, which is when honestly this thing started to kind of crash and burn was after that. But Miguel's done everything in his career. And at age 39, he should not be expected to carry this team. That's not the expectation for him, but he is the only guy who is consistently producing. And he's not hitting home runs, but he's consistently producing, singles, and he's been able to notch some doubles, and he has flashed a little bit of extra base power recently. So those are positive signs to see from him. But overall, he can't do it alone anymore. And the guy that you signed, Javier Baez, is not doing it. That's the biggest problem is that there isn't a guy that's able to step up and kind of carry the weight of this team right now. There isn't a guy that's going to be able to come in there and hit a big home run and kind of get the momentum turned around. That hasn't happened this season. And it's been a mess. It's been a mess. When the Tigers do get runners on base, which has been really rare, they're stranding. And that's, again, just not a recipe for success. You can't win that way. They're getting beat by good teams. They're getting beat by bad teams. They're lucky that they were able to sweep the Baltimore Orioles last weekend at Comerica Park. That helped them get 3 wins there, but then they went to Tampa Bay and they lost 2 of 3. Tigers have lost 10 of 12 series. The list goes on and on with what's going wrong with this team, but it all goes back to the offense and guys that have track records that aren't producing. Jonathan Scope has been in this league a very long time. He is not producing. Jamer Candelario has been really good the last 2 seasons. He is not producing. Robbie Grossman has been around a long time, and last year he really seemed to develop into a bona fide major leaguer, a guy who can start every single day for you. On base percentage is always really high. He'll draw a lot of walks. He showed a lot of power last year, which was surprising. And then obviously was pretty crafty on the bases and stole a lot. And right now the Tigers have him hitting in their leadoff spot, and he's got 0 home runs. He's got 1 stolen base, and he's not hitting the ball well. He's drawing walks, but he's striking out a ton. So that's not helping him out. It's one of those things where they're just not getting production from really anybody on this team. And you kind of feel bad for, AJ Hinch, who has continued to talk about winning and trying to stay positive. And he's been critical at times. And you've seen certain situations where things have boiled over a little bit, but he tries to stay positive. He tries to look forward. He tries to talk about winning the next game. That's been like his mantra since the Tigers hired him back in October of 2020. And it worked really well last season. They got hot and they rode this idea of just win the next day, and focus on one day at a time. And the idea there is you win a game, and that turns into winning another game, which turns into winning a series, which turns into, winning a week long of games. And then you put together winning months, and you look at the end of the year and you have a winning record. And the Tigers from, May 8th on last year had a winning record. They played really, really, really good baseball. And again, it's May 21st in 2022, and the Tigers are not playing good baseball. The defense has improved a little bit since the earlier part of the season. Errors really plagued the Tigers as they started to tumble and stumble, but it's been a little bit better this time around. Javier Baez is a guy too, talk about him offensively, but at shortstop, he's expected to be a Gold Glove caliber shortstop. I don't think he's been a Gold Glove caliber shortstop. He's made Spencer Torkelson at first base work quite a bit. Torkelson's been phenomenal, saving him quite a few times. But overall, I think the defense has been a little bit better. So that is kind of one positive takeaway. But again, this is a game of scoring runs. You have to score runs to win games. And the Tigers aren't doing that right now. And like I said, AJ Hinch is doing what he can. He's trying to manage with what he can. I think general manager Al Avila is trying to manage with what he can. Look, there were a lot of expectations for this team coming into the season, but I don't think that anybody thought that it was going to be this bad. Like, nobody thought that it could ever get this bad. And even when it did get this bad a few weeks ago, you thought, okay, like, it can't get any worse because they've already hit rock bottom. Well, we keep figuring out that there is new rock bottom. It seems like with every loss now, you're at a new low point. And the team is trying to stay positive. You can tell that they're trying to stay focused. But when you're losing this many games, and when you have 13 wins on May 21st and 26 losses, and you got to win 77 games the rest of the way, I mean, again, you have to win, just less than 63% of your games to get to 90 wins and make the playoffs. Like, that's a reality. That's where the Tigers are at. And it's a burden. It's a burden, and it's something that I don't think they're going to be able to turn it around from. We'll see. Again, there's a lot of baseball to be played. There's a lot to find out about this team. It'll be interesting to see if certain guys are going to be able to get healthy. Like I said, it seems like Matt Manning is going to be able to come back here relatively soon, but we don't know a lot about a guy like Eduardo Rodriguez or a guy like Casey Mize. There is some optimism around Eduardo, but still, they don't really know what's wrong with him. And that's a problem. It's a left side injury. They're trying to figure out, is it oblique? Is it rib cage? Like, what is it specifically? Tigers don't know. MRI didn't show anything. So that's good in one sense, but also scary in another sense, because, Eduardo's not going to know what's wrong with him until he starts throwing, and that could bring up more pain. So we'll have to see what that becomes. But he's down, and Casey Mize is down. Tarek Skubal seems like he's going to be all right after taking the liner off the shin. But again, still need x-rays there. There's just a lot going wrong with this team, and it's a lot of offensive problems. It's a lot of injury problems. But really, it comes down to the players are not producing. I don't think you can really place blame on AJ Hinch. Al Avila, he put together a roster that people looked at and thought, okay, this team can win some games. This team can actually make some noise. This team has a chance. You felt like the Tigers had a chance when the season started. And again, you have a guy like Javier Baez and Austin Meadows and Jamer Candelario and Jonathan Scope and a young rookie in Spencer Torkelson. Speaking of rookies and young players, Riley Green on track to come back towards the end of May. Seems like he's gonna be able to get into some rehab games at that point. Should be able to join the Tigers in June. So he'll be a huge addition. But again, it might be too late for him to even make a considerable impact. But yes, so Al Avila put together a roster that you felt like had a chance to win games. got Tucker Barnhart, 2-time Gold Glove winner behind the plate, who's also improved defensively recently. Then the outfield, again, it was supposed to be Riley Green and Robbie Grossman and Austin Meadows. And starting rotation looked like it was pretty solid coming out of spring training. And then all of a sudden it collapsed. And the Tigers are going to have to work some magic. They're going to have to find a miracle to climb out of this thing. I feel like at this point, even talking about playoffs kind of seems crazy just because of what needs to happen for them to get there. I think trying to battle back and being 500 has got to be the goal right now if you're looking at it from a big picture. If you're looking at it from a fan perspective, you just want this team to become competitive. You just want this team to be able to look like a 500 ball club night in and night out, to compete with good teams, to compete with bad teams, and to score some runs. And right now, they're not doing that. We're going to see if it turns around. The Tigers have 2 more games here in Cleveland against the Guardians. We'll see what happens. It's a complete mess right now. Something's got to change. But that's all for me. Thanks, guys.